What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here with the Distance. Got a fantasy matchup for you guys today. Number 86, George Foreman versus David Tua. Heavyweight matchup. David Tua is a fighter who has never won a heavyweight championship, despite the fact that he's knocked out, I believe, three titles. Hasim Rahman, who was pretty much considered the lineal champ for a bit after knocking out Lennox Lewis in 2001. John Ruiz, who was a WBA heavyweight champion, won the belt multiple times and fought for it multiple times. And I believe he's knocked out Oleg Moskayev, if I'm not mistaken. So it's three heavyweight titles. One short term lineal champion. But David Tua, overall, a very tough competitor, comes forward. I believe by looking at him, a lot of the power comes from the legs and upper body, and it kind of just correlates together into just one big shot. But David Tua never won a championship at the heavyweight level, despite the fact of knocking out three titles and fighting the champion Lennox Lewis. And it has to be messed up that Lewis, I believe, fought Tua in like November of 2000. And after Lennox fought Tua, I believe it was right after Lennox fought Tua, a man that Tua had defeated Lewis, Hasim Rahman, April of '01, I believe it was. April or March, it was in the springtime when Lewis lost to Hasim Rahman. But George Foreman, on the George Foreman, Foreman defeated Joe Frazier for the heavyweight championship, as we all know. Knocked him down multiple times to win the championship in 2 rounds. Overall, when you look at George Foreman, he was on, if you look at him, man, he was on his way to having a big reign of terror. People expected him to possibly be one of the longest reigning heavyweight champions, due to the fact that he knocked out and had no problem just knocking out Frazier in 2 rounds, the man that gave Muhammad Ali his first loss. And he just manhandled him with his punches and just stood up and fought tall and knocked him down multiple times, even though he didn't fully take out Frazier because Frazier continued to get up. He didn't, knock him the fuck out or anything, but Foreman, it just looked scary at the time, and he lifted, Frazier off of his feet, and that's just me exaggerating. But George Foreman, overall, I believe could have been one of the best heavyweights of all time. I think he had the potential to be the greatest. That's just my opinion. He knocked out Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, two men that defeated Muhammad Ali. And then he went on. He lost to Muhammad Ali in, I believe, '75 in the Rumble in the Jungle. Lost to him. Ali tactically defeated him with the rope-a-dope, as we all know. No need to explain it, but basically sapped all of his energy, punched himself out, knocked out. But George Foreman, man, if Foreman stuck to, in his earlier bouts, he did a lot of boxing. If he was stuck to the boxing and then the punching, doing a little bit of both, then I think we could have seen a very dangerous heavyweight champion, maybe an actual 10-year reign as the heavyweight champion, if you ask me, if he was stuck to his normal boxing. But he got so used to standing up and just punching and coming forward, and it worked for him. So I don't blame him for abandoning that style. But overall, let's get into the matchup. Foreman versus, and I only mentioned Foreman's first reign because I'm gonna analyze the younger George Foreman. George Foreman versus David Tua. Now I'm about to sneeze. No, I'm not. All right. Foreman versus Tua. George Foreman, I believe, is going to stand straight up, and Tua is going to come forward. Tua doesn't have the movement that Muhammad Ali or I believe Jimmy Young had. Jimmy Young was another boxer that moved a lot, that gave Foreman trouble. Foreman had a lot of trouble moving, against movers. Larry Holmes is the person that brought it up first. He had trouble against movers, fighters that moved, even though Ali, clinched inside. Ellis, simply just moved, outboxed him. But David Tua doesn't have that type of movement. Tua doesn't bounce around his toes. He's quite flat footed, but he does. He jabs and he looks for the big shot. Looks for it sometimes behind the jab or through counter punching from time to time. So, but David Tua, believe it or not, is actually I believe he's actually bigger than George Foreman, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's bigger than George Foreman. Like as far as weight goes, not he's not as tall, but as weight goes, Tua is actually bigger than Foreman. But overall, but overall, I think David Tua is going to stand right in front of him. And the difference between Tua and Foreman's, I think Tua's stamina is a lot better than Foreman's. But Foreman did fight. He did. And the thing with Foreman though is Foreman didn't rarely got past the early rounds. Most of the time he had knockouts towards the end of his. I mean, in the mid to late parts of the fights, he would have knockouts. Some think that he could have lost the match to Chivalo if the match would have went a little bit longer. Who knows? But honestly, I'm gonna go with George Foreman in this matchup. David Tua, I think, is gonna stand right in front of him. I think he's gonna do a little bit of bobbing and weaving, but I think Foreman's gonna come forward and he's gonna throw a lot of punches, throw a lot of combinations, and just kind of just impose the will on him. But like I said, Foreman had the tools to be to possibly have like a 10, 11 year reign as the heavyweight champion. Big, huge reach. Could have boxed if he wanted to. He could have boxed. Um, enormous, enormous strength, brute strength. Um, but he did what worked for him, so I don't blame him for doing it. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna go with George Foreman. And I'll say George Foreman. I think will get. I'll say he'll get the decision against David Tua. Um, but anyway, guys, thanks for watching. That was Distance. Peace.